Yonta Privishimam Vachamimam Prasuptam Sanjeevayadi Akhilasakthidharasudhamna Anyamscha Hastacharana Sravanatvagadin Prananamo Bhagavade Purushaya Tubhyam Om Stavakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharmasya Rupini Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. So we are continuing our discussion on this evolution of Indian thoughts, especially the Vedantic or theistic systems of Indian philosophy. We already completed Advaita system in about 45 lectures, then Ramanuja, then Madhva, and as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the in timeline, Nimbarka comes before Madhva, but because of the fact that these three systems of Vedanta philosophy, Advaita, Visishta, Advaita, and Dvaita, Sri Shankaracharya's philosophy, Ramanuja system, and Madhva system, they happen to be the most prominent among the theistic Vedanta systems of philosophy. So we discussed Madhva system before Nimbarka. Now, if you just make a thorough analysis of these systems of Vedanta philosophy, you'll find that at the top you find Advaita system, which actually accommodates all other ideas of Godhead, all other metaphysical ideas of the supreme reality, but also gives a transcendental dimension going beyond the anthropomorphic ideas of God. I mean, Shankara system is a kind of universal absolutism, which primarily teaches you that God, in the highest definition, is one divine reality which is all-pervading, that is omnipresent, immanent, and also transcendental. It does not reject other systems, but it says that there is a higher and much more transcendental level of spiritual evolution, and when we reach that state, we will see the divine presence of God everywhere, not as an anthropomorphic creator God, but as an idea of the divine that is all-pervading. It does not reject the creator God idea that is found in the Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka, Vallabha, Chaitanya and other systems, but it goes beyond that. It accommodates all other systems, but goes beyond that. So in this evolution, as I mentioned, Shankara comes in the 8th century, Ramanuja in the 11th to 12th century, Nimbarka in the 12th and 13th, Madhvacharya actually between 13 and 14, and Vallabha 15 and 16, and Chaitanya in 15 and 16 centuries. Of these, all the non-Advaitic systems, all the non-dualistic systems belong to one broad category. They are different manifestations of Vaishnava philosophy. This is an important point to remember. So you can see on the one hand in Advaita an idea of God that goes beyond the personal, beyond the anthropomorphic, beyond the personal, but without rejecting the personal. It accepts that God can certainly be viewed as a creator of this world, as the repository of all conceivable qualities and attributes, but that view is not wrong, but there is a higher and more complete view and realization. And at that stage, you can see and feel and experience the presence of God as one divine reality, not only within the church or a temple, but even outside the church and temple. So it is kind of universal spiritual humanism. Now, just to recapitulate what we said in the early classes, especially in Nimbarka system, quickly I shall make a broad recapitulation of what I said earlier. Nimbarka system is called Dvaita Dvaita. It is actually a combination of non-dualistic and also dualistic concepts of supreme reality. And sometimes if you read some of the traditional books, you may find this word Swabhavika Dvaita Dvaita, or Swabhavika Bheda Bheda. This is Sanskrit term, Bheda Abheda means, in reality, it means the idea that God is distinct and different from us, and also the idea that God is the same as us. I mean, there is not only distinction, but also there is identity. Identity of God with all living beings in this world, with entire creation, identity, and also distinction. So both identity and distinction are recognized in the Nimbarka system. This frequently raises a strong objection, which I have found, especially while addressing students and teachers who are not familiar with the Hindu state of evolution. In Hinduism, if your view is different from me, it's not because you are wrong, but because you have a different perspective. So, if A is different from B, it doesn't mean that B is wrong for that reason, A alone is correct. B also is another perspective, another approach to God, especially in spirituality. So both A and B can be correct, and C also can be correct, because all the different spiritual seekers in the world represent different levels of our understanding, different levels of evolution of our understanding of the God idea or spirituality in general. So in this respect, Nimbarka system is actually a combination of identity and distinction. That's an important point to remember. Which means Brahman is the controller called Niyanta, and this external world, which is non-effulgent, which is insentient, which is within the control of Brahman as God, and also all the living beings are also within the control of this divine reality as an anthropomorphic creator God. So we have to remember Nimbarka himself he was a kind of Bhagavata school he belonged to Bhagavata school of Vaishnavism. So Bhagavata, Vasudeva, that was his system of his idea of God. We will discuss this today more elaborately in the coming 1 hour or so. Now, another important aspect of Nimbarka system is that he gave a lot of importance not only to the Upanishads, not only to the most fundamental spiritual and philosophical sections of Vedic literature, but he also gave a lot of importance to semi-mythological, half mythological and half historical works called Mahabharata, Vishnu Purana and so on. So very often, and this is a point to remember, very often you find whenever a theologian or a philosopher, theologian means Ramanuja was primarily a theologian. So if we read Ramanuja's system, it is primarily a theological system. But Shankara's system is not only a theological system, it is also a metaphysical system. In Shankara's system, you can think of the supreme reality without thinking of God. So it is not entirely a theological system. It is a metaphysical system and also a theological system, Shankara's non-dualism. But Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka and others belong to this category. Their systems are primarily theological in nature, mostly centered around the idea of a God and the revealed scriptures. So according to him, the highest concept of the divine reality is one omniscient, all-knowing, supreme reality, which can manifest with form and also without form. And there is also this idea of the same supreme reality as the creator, as the all-knowing, so compassionate creator God. And again, the same reality can also be considered to be the protector of everything, everyone in this world. So, after having said this, now we'll come to the philosophy proper, today's session, which I'm going to discuss some very important ideas from his own original work. Now, coming to Nimbarka's important contribution to Indian philosophy or Indian spiritual philosophical tradition, you have to keep in mind his magnum opus is a small, short, brief commentary on Brahma Sutras called Vedanta Sutras. It is called Vedanta Parijata Saurabha. That is the name of his book. That can be called his most important work and a magnum opus. All his philosophical ideas, major philosophical ideas, theological ideas are well expressed in this very short book. One distinction of Nimbarka's writing was that he was not a dialectician like Shankaracharya or Ramanuja or Madhva. He was more of a simple writer without giving any importance to polemical exercises or dialectical exercises. He did not criticize any opposing system. And those of you who may happen to read some modern critical works written on Nimbarka's contribution to Indian thought may come across this view. So I want to give a warning that sometimes some modern critics, modern writers have given the view that Nimbarka wrote a book called Madhyamukha Mardana. That is actually a wrong view. Making Nimbarka as a very violent critic of Madhvacharya. That book is not considered to be an authentic work. It's not taken to be a real original work of Nimbarka by senior scholars, traditional scholars. But still the view you can find in many quarters that Nimbarka wrote a book criticizing, in very strong violent language, criticizing Madhvacharya's view. But then there are two other books that are frequently attributed to Nimbarka. One is Mantra Rahasya Shodashi and another well-known book which is called Prapanna Kalpavali. So the first book is Vedanta Parijata Saurabha. It is a very short commentary on Brahma Sutras, quoting mostly from some Puranas, Bhagavad Gita and some Upanishad sources. Very brief. But there are some great writers who wrote commentaries on this book. One is Srinivasa, who wrote Vedanta Kaustubha, well-known commentary by a disciple and a follower of Nimbarka's philosophy. His name was Srinivasa. He wrote Vedanta Kaustubha. It's a commentary on Vedanta Parijata Saurabha. Another important book, the very short, only 10 verses. It's called Rasasloki, Siddhanta Ratna. It's also called Vedanta Kamadhenu. So primarily we can be sure of only two important books by Nimbarka. One is Vedanta Parijata Saurabha, the other is Dasasloki or Siddhanta Ratna, Vedanta Kamadhenu. Now, the concept of the ultimate divine reality or the concept of Godhead that Nimbarka tried to establish in his magnum opus, that is Vedanta Parijata Saurabha, is this. He was primarily a Bhagavata Vasudeva Vaishnava. So it means he belonged to the Vaishnava tradition. But in Vaishnava tradition, there are many denominations. And one denomination is the Bhagavata denomination, which is linked to different interpretations of the views based on Vishnu Purana and Bhagavata. So his idea of the Supreme God is Vasudeva. So often Krishna, accompanied by a divine feminine reality called Radha. So you can find this well known in the Chaitanya tradition also. not in Madhva tradition or Ramanuja tradition. Because Ramanuja belonged to a different denomination of subsect of Vaishnavism. It is called Panjaratra Narayana system. It means they belong to the more traditional. And his idea of God, Ramanuja's idea of God was Sriman Narayana. The same anthropomorphic idea of God acceptable to the Vaishnava traditions. One, Narayana, Sriman Narayana, that was the idea of God in Ramanuja system. And Vasudeva was the name given by, and often Krishna, Vasudeva Krishna. Often you find in Nimbarka system, he was essentially a great devotee of Krishna. So he lived in Vrindavan, which is supposed to be, historically supposed to be associated with the life and teachings of Lord Krishna, who lived as a small little boy. And his sporting activities, small little boy, he grew up in Vrindavan. So he left his place, essentially he was from South India, he was born in a Telugu family, Telugu speaking community. And later on he participated in some important debates, philosophical debates with Advaitins and others. So he became well known as a great scholar and debater. And then he moved to Vrindavan, which is historically associated with the life of Lord Krishna. And as I mentioned earlier, his philosophy is frequently designated as called Swabhavika Bheda. Bheda means distinction. Abheda means identity. So it is a combination of Dvaita and Advaita. So it's called Dvaita. Primarily what it means is this. If you accept the Bheda view or the view of the distinction between God and this world, and God and his creation, all living beings and this world, should be accepted. There is a distinction, a permanent distinction between God and all living beings. That is Madhvacharya's view, that is cutthroat Dvaita view. Abheda means identity. So Nimbarka accepted this view that on the one hand there is distinction between God and his creation. On the other hand, there is identity in the sense that the whole creation is dependent upon God. Without God, there is no creation. So there is an inseparable link, and this creates this idea of identity. So distinction and identity both are acceptable to Nimbarka. So his system came to be known as Swabhavika Bheda to distinguish his system from another earlier Vaishnavite system of philosophy. It is called Bheda proper. It is the old Bheda school, and his exponent was a great philosopher who belonged to 10th century AD. I mean, he would live little later after Shankaracharya, post-Shankarite but pre-Ramanujite philosopher. He lived before Ramanuja but after Shankara. So his system is called Bheda. So in order to distinguish Nimbarka system from Bhaskara system, the name is called Bhaskara. He was post-Shankarite but pre-Ramanujite Vedantin. In order to distinguish the Dvaita or Bheda view of Nimbarka from a similar view, a similar system of philosophy which is expounded by Bhaskara. Nimbarka called his system Swabhavika Bheda. So these are a few important things to be kept in mind. Now, in many ways you find Nimbarka resembles Ramanuja and Madhva. Not in everything, but in some of the fundamental views they had, especially in their criticism of Shankarite Advaita. In many ways he resembles. One is that both Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka and Vallabha, Pushtimarga, another Vaishnavite philosopher, who came after Nimbarka, after Madhvacharya. So all of them, and also of course Baladeva, who belonged to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system. So they all criticized one important philosophical doctrine, which is very important in Advaita system, that is, this world is mithya. That is, this Jagat is not absolutely real. This is a common unifying factor, which unified all non-Advaitic, or you may call it anti-Advaitic, non-dualistic philosophers belonging to Vaishnava tradition of different denominations, whether it was Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka, Vallabha, or Chaitanya, or Baladeva. All of them agreed on one point, that is, the Advaitins' view of this world is wrong, because Advaitins consider this world as mithya. And those of you who have been listening to this series of lectures will remember that Shankaracharya did not teach that this world is absolutely unreal. What he taught was simple. He only taught that this world is not permanent. This world is not absolutely real. But he did not teach that this world is absolutely unreal. He did not teach. Because this world and everything in this world, whether your human body or oceans and mountains and valleys or living beings, they continue changing. They don't remain in the same manner. They don't remain in an unchanging fashion. They change according to time and space. So they are not absolutely unreal, but they are not absolutely real either. Because to be considered to be absolutely real, anything to be considered to be absolutely real, it should remain unchanging. It should remain unaffected by any kind of modifications or changes, time, space or causation. That's the Advaitins' view of Mithyatvam. I explained this in the light of many important Advaitic texts, Panchapadika of Padmapada, Panchapadika Vivarana of Prakasha Medi, and Vivarana Prameya Sangraha of Vidyaranya, and of course many other books like, for example, Chitsuki, Tattva Pradipika of Chitsukacharya, and also Ananda Bodha's Nyaya Deepavali. So all these important books define Mithya as something that exists for some time but doesn't exist for all time. In that respect, their existence is only relative, not absolute. Now, this view is not accepted or fully represented or recognized by these non-Advaitic Vaishnavite philosophers. In their books, you can find this criticism again and again. Advaitins said this world is unreal. That is absolutely wrong. Advaitins do not say that this world is not existing. Advaitins only tell you that this world does not exist for all time without any change. This world is changing, so its existence is relative. So this is an important point to remember. So in this respect, Nimbarka criticizes the Advaitins' concept of cause-effect relationship. I shall try to explain this by quoting from Nimbarka's own works and also from the commentary. Nimbarka's magnum opus, as I mentioned, is Vedanta Parijata Saurabha, and his disciple wrote a well-known book that is called Vedanta Kaustubha, which is a commentary on Vedanta Parijata Saurabha, and also another disciple of Nimbarka. His name is Keshava Bharati. He is a Keshava Kashmiri, another name Keshava Kashmiri. Keshava Kashmiri Bhattacharya. He also wrote a sub-commentary on Nimbarka's books. So, one is Nimbarka himself, and then his disciple and his commentator, that is Srinivasa, and also another disciple of Nimbarka, Mikeshava Kashmiri Bhattacharya. They also tried to elaborate Nimbarka's views more further because Vedanta Parijata Saurabha is very, very brief. So, in one of his important views is criticism of, I mentioned the Vivartavada. That is an important criticism. Purely from dialectical point of view, though Nimbarka was not a dialectician in the sense that Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya was. But anyway, his commentators, his disciples in their books Vedanta Kaustubha and elsewhere, they criticized the Advaitin's view of cause-effect. What it means is this. So take the example, for instance, you take the example of gold. Gold is common in all golden ornaments. Or let's say thread is common in all clothes. You remove all the gold from a golden ring or golden cup or golden necklace. There is no necklace. All these ornaments vanish when you take away its essential matter, the material cause. Or you take all the clay from a clay pot. There will be no clay pot. So the clay pot is nothing but a manifestation of clay in a distinct form, and so it has got a distinct name, Nama and Rupa. In other words, the clay has not become the clay pot. The clay appears to have become the clay pot. Why? Because you break the clay pot, it goes back to clay, from where it came, the material cause. And before before the manufacturer made a clay pot, it was still clay. Or before a goldsmith made a golden necklace, it was gold. When you melt it, it goes back to gold. So what it means is gold is a material cause here. And the jewelry maker or maybe the pot maker is an efficient cause, nimitta karana. The other one is the real material cause. So the point is, according to Advaitins, the clay has not become the clay pot. The clay appears to have become the clay pot. In other words, it is not transformation, it is not real change, it is only apparent change, transfiguration. It becomes another thing for some time because if you break it, it goes back to clay. It is called Vivartavada. In opposition to this, there is Parinamavada, which is the view of all these great non-Advaitic Vaishnava philosophers. They say God has become this world, like seeds become oil. So the real change, Parinama. So Nimbarka's strong criticism against Vivartavada is very important for us to remember, in the sense he accepts that there is some identity, a similarity between this world and different living beings. There is some identity, a similarity with God, but there is also a distinction. So, these are some important points to remember. Now, I shall just refer to some of these views from Vedanta, Parijata Saurabha. Of course, this particular one is from a commentary by Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta. His name is Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta. He wrote this well-known commentary on Brahma Sutra Bhashya by Nimbarka. According to him, of course, the real meaning is this. He refutes the Advaitin view that Brahman is devoid of, or Brahman is not necessarily to be defined as a repository of all divine attributes. In other words, according to Advaitins, the absolute reality cannot be defined in any way. Even if you define absolute reality, let's say, as the repository, as the source of all auspicious qualities, that also is a kind of definition. So if you define something, that becomes limited. So the absolute reality of God should be beyond definition, beyond description in terms of attributes and qualities. Now, Nimbarka doesn't accept this. Nimbarka says, for example, uh, according to him, Napi nirdharmakam brahma tasya jnana kriyadinam swabhavika shaktinam shastra siddhatvat atha ikshana kshamaschedana vishesha sarvajna sarvashakti purushottama eva sashabdavachyaha. So it's a reference to one statement in Chandogya Upanishad. What it means is this: Brahman cannot be called nirdharmaka, means Brahman cannot be described as being devoid of any attributes, because tasya jnana kriyadinam swabhavika shaktinam shastra siddhatvat. Brahman is a repository. Brahman is the source of all powers of action, all powers of knowledge, all attributes and qualities and characteristics. So, for that reason, it is wrong to define Brahman as being beyond attributes, qualities and characteristics. Now here we should remember, Advaitins do not say that Brahman is devoid of. What Advaitins tell you is Brahman is beyond definition in terms of attributes and qualities. That's an important point to remember. It is a highly dialectical point which frequently is discussed only among scholars. So Advaitins do not say that Brahman is devoid of attributes and qualities. Brahman is, or God, let us say, instead of using the word Brahman, which is the name that Advaitins use, and also other systems, but according to non-Advaitic systems, that is Saguna Brahman. Brahman conceived to be the creator of this world, conceived to be the protector of this world. That Brahman, that God is the repository. He possesses all conceivable qualities, characteristics and powers and knowledge, everything. Everything happens in this world because of his power. Everything is created by him. Therefore, it is wrong to describe that Brahman as being beyond actions and attributes. But you have to remember, what Advaitins tell you is this: Brahman is beyond any kind of comprehension or definition or description in terms of actions, attributes or qualities. Means indescribable. The indescribable nature of the absolute reality is the actual implication of Sadasattana-adhigaranatva mithyatvam, that mithyatvam definition by Patmavada and Panchapadya Vivarana. That means what is considered to be the locus of something which is neither real in the absolute sense nor unreal in the absolute sense. That is mithya, that is the definition. And this definition should be understood in the light of the Advaitin's view that Brahman is beyond words, beyond description, beyond definition. It's called anivachaniya, means beyond definition. Because the moment you define something, it becomes limited. The highest idea of supreme reality, God, should be silence, because words cannot express or explain or describe the infinite reality. Only experience can explain the infinite reality. There are many such statements, of course, in these commentaries, which I don't want to go into details. And there are a few more things which I want to describe. That is related to Brahma Sutra Bhashya. I'm just taking a few examples from Nimbarka's on original books. The reason is, Nimbarka's books are not so well studied outside India for many reasons. The most popular and the most universally accepted view is Advaita of Shankaracharya. Nimbarka's views mostly remain confined to a community that follows his tradition, who follows a method of worshipping Vasudeva Krishna as instructed by Nimbarka and his followers. So they are a very sattvic people, very peace-loving people. They are a community, they form a community of devotees of Lord Krishna. You can find them in many parts of India. It's not as a philosophical doctrine. It is not as popular or as universally acceptable or accepted as Advaita. Still, it requires a lot of attention in modern times, because it is one way of looking the absolute reality, which is different way of looking, different from Advaita's view. There is one important sutra in Brahma Sutra. So I am referring to that, and also I refer to his views on the same bhashya. Anandamaya Abhyasat. Those of you who may later refer to the book, it is Brahma Sutra Bhashya, first chapter, first pada, second, in some places maybe 13 sutra, sometimes 12 sutra. This is minor verse differences in versions. Anandamaya Abhyasat. The idea is this: Brahman is it has got abundance of ananda or bliss. Now, according to Advaitins, you cannot say that the absolute reality or the absolute spiritual experience is something like bliss alone. But it's only an attempt to explain this absolute reality in words. Now, in this context, in his book, in Nimbarka's book, he refers to a well-known section in Taittiriya Upanishad. Those of you may have heard of this. It's called Ananda Mimamsa. The concept of 5 sheets, that is Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. They consider 5 sheets. So what's our true nature? So we have this outer body, Annamaya, which is material, which is nourished by food that we eat. So within this there is Pranamaya Kosha, the vital energy. And even within this there is mind, the realm of mind, thoughts and emotions, Manomaya Kosha. Kosha means sheath. And even within this is Vijnanamaya Kosha, the intellect. And even within all this, there is Anandamaya Kosha. So these are the 5 sheets. And according to traditional Advaita, Vedanta, the Anandamaya Kosha, which can be linked to the ideas Satchidananda, the Anandamaya Kosha is closest to Atman, but it is not the same as Atman. But when you realize your true nature as something that goes beyond body, beyond vital energy or vital airs, vital, say what you call prana, beyond mind, beyond intellect, then what happens is we feel a kind of inner joy. We are not affected by what happens to us at the physical level, because we can identify ourselves as something that goes beyond physical body. Those of you are interested later, because this is being recorded, you can listen, you can take this book, Taittiriya Upanishad. We feel a kind of inner joy. We are not affected by what happens to us at the physical level, because we can identify ourselves as something that goes beyond physical body. Those of you are interested. There is something.
Thank you, Maharaj. Please continue.
Okay, it's okay now? Okay, thank you. So, those of you who are interested, you can refer to this very small book, Taittiriya Upanishad. It's a very wonderful book. It takes you from the physical to the blissful. It starts at the physical level, then towards the level of the vital energy, then mind, then intellect, then the eternal bliss. Now, this bliss aspect is common in all spiritual traditions. What do we feel when we realize that we are not just a physical body? So we are not affected by what happens to our body. And when we feel we are not this mind either, then we even when we feel unhappy or happy or different moods of the mind, we are able to connect ourselves with this blissful aspect. So beyond the physical, beyond the vital energy, beyond the mind, beyond intellect. So if we can link ourselves and if we can identify ourselves with something which is transcendental, with the innermost, which is within everything, which is closest to Atman, what happens is we feel a kind of infinite bliss and happiness. This is common. I can give many examples. Suppose a physically handicapped person is reading a wonderful literary classic piece of literature, let us say, or listening to music, or maybe drawing a picture. You can find that his bodily problems, he may be physically handicapped. He totally forgets all that. He is able to identify himself in what he is writing if he is a poet, in what he is reading if he is a connoisseur of literature. Because he is able to connect himself, identify himself with something that goes beyond the body. So, the bodily problems do not afflict him. Again, if he can even go beyond the mind, beyond intellect, the source of all joy, the source of all bliss, what happens is we are very close to Atman, our true identity, which is beyond, which transcends all the other four sheets. That is, Anandamaya Kosha transcends, is the innermost of Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha. The physical sheath, the vital energy sheath, the mental sheath, the intellectual, and even the bliss. And this blissfulness itself is essentially linked to something that goes beyond all this. That is Atman. This is the view that you find in the Taittiriya Upanishad. So there is this sutra in Brahma Sutra, Anandamaya Abhyasad. Abhyasa means again and again is repeated. This Ananda idea is repeated again and again in this part of the Taittiriya Upanishad. Now I want to say a few things about this Brahma Sutra. It is the most foundational, from a dialectical point of view, is the most important book in Vedantic tradition. The source is the Upanishads, but in Brahma Sutras, the great teacher Shankaracharya established Advaita, taking quotations from all important metaphysical sources of the Vedic literature called Upanishads. So, in the first and most well-known commentary on Brahma Sutras by Shankaracharya, who lived in 8th century, that means around 600 years before Nimbarka. So, he quotes from Taittiriya Upanishad. And Nimbarka also did the same. Ramanuja, Madhva also did the same, but their view was different, their conclusion was different. The Taittiriya ke Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Kosha Chadushtayam, Anukramya, Amnayadi, Tasmadka Edasmad, Vijnanamaya, Anandondra Atma, Anandamaya Stenaisha Burnaidi. This is a very important mantra in this. Tasmadva Edasmad, Vijnanamayad, Anyondra Atma, Anandamaya, etc. Tenaisha Purnaha. It comes Taittiriya Upanishad, 2nd chapter, 5th section, 5th Anuvaka. Those who can listen to this. Now the point is this. Here, this statement. Now, according to Shankaracharya, according to Advaitins, this Anandamaya Kosha, the state of infinite inner blissfulness, stands closest to the highest spiritual experience. But the result is not the highest spiritual reality. The spiritual reality goes even beyond all this. But according to all non-Advaitic Vaishnava philosophers, who considered God as the repository of all conceivable qualities and characteristics, according to them, this blissfulness itself is a fundamental defining quality of God, conceived to be, according to Nimbarka, as Vasudeva Paramatman, that is Krishna. So this should be kept in mind. More or less, all these Vaishnava systems are very similar to the ideas of God in most of the Abrahamic monotheistic systems. This is an important point. And we have to remember again and again, Advaita does not refute this. Advaita only tells you that there is one step beyond this, a higher understanding. So, you cannot even define Brahman as something which is a source of all blissfulness. Because the moment you define, that reality which is defined becomes limited. And to remain infinite, it should go even any scope for definition. Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, Atma, Me Shuddhyanta. Nimbarka quotes a very important verse from Mahanarayana Upanishad. Actually, it is a mantra used frequently in many of the monastic vow ceremonies. So, when you perform a ritual, you utter this mantra, which actually Nimbarka quotes in his commentary on the Anandamaya Abhyasad, Brahma Sutras. You have to remember, those who were interested, you can listen, you can refer. It is Brahma Sutra of Badarayana Sutras, the first chapter, first pada. There are 4 chapters. In each chapter has got 4 sections. And this is the first chapter, first section. 12th sutra, there are slight variations, or 13th sutra, Anandamaya Abhyasa. It is linked to these mantras mentioned in the Taittiriya Upanishad. That means, let me be purified, tasesha eva sharira atma ya purvasya, etc. So this also in the second chapter, 6th mantra. So what it means is this. We'll continue our discussion, slightly difficult to understand, but the point is this. Advaitins accept that when you reach this higher spiritual experience, you feel this infinite joy and blissfulness within. And then this infinite blissfulness happens at every stage. When you transcend, as I mentioned just now, when you transcend your physical dimension, when you can identify yourself as not the physical body, but as the vital energy, or when you even transcend that, when you can define yourself as a psychological being, as a mental being, then even if your body is not very good, you have slightly suffering from ill health at the physical level, still you will be able to enjoy reading or listening to music, drawing a picture. Why? Because we are not identifying ourselves any longer with the physical body. Without that kind of higher identification, no one can become a great musician, a painter, a novelist, or a creative writer, or accomplish anything in life beyond the physical. Because we are always trying, we have a natural urge to seek our identity beyond the physical, something beyond the body. And again, even going beyond the mind, if you can identify yourself with Vijnana, it's a Vijnanamaya kosha. That is Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, 4th kosha. That's what Nimbarka is referring to. Kosha Chadushtaya Manukramya Amnayade, etc. Kosha Chadushtaya means these 4 koshas, 4 sheets, that is physical, Annamaya kosha, then vital energy, Pranamaya kosha, mental, Manomaya kosha, and intellectual, Vijnanamaya kosha. So, when you transcend the physical and identify yourself with the vital energy, you feel a joy. When you go even beyond that. When you identify yourself, the mind, you feel a great joy. That joy is not a joy of that's empirical, joy of this world. It is a deeper feeling of inner blissfulness. And when we can transcend all these four sheets, kosha adushtayam, all the physical, energy level, mental and intellectual. And when you can identify yourself as the repository of blissfulness, then you transcend all the other three sheets. Now, Upanishads tell you the supreme reality is even beyond these four sheets, beyond this even Anandamaya Kosha, beyond all other Panchakosha. And when we reach that experience, then we feel kind of inner joy. And that joy, that blissfulness can only be expressed in silence and not in words. That is Antai Bahuvadinam Anantai Mukam. The Vedic statement is there. What is finite, what is within limits, you can write a big book about it. Antai Bahuvadinam. What is limited, you can write so much, talk so much about it. But what is infinite cannot be expressed. Anantai Mukam. The infinite can only be expressed through silence. Now, what I mean to say, when you compare the Advaitin concept of the absolute reality and all the non-Advaitin concepts of absolute reality, Ramanuja, Madhva, Nimbarka, Vallabha and Chaitanya. Baladeva was the great commentator of Brahma Sutras from Chaitanya tradition, Ajinta Bheda Veda is called. We will discuss later. So when you compare these two, what we find is Advaita accommodates, accepts all others, but goes even beyond that. But non-Advaitin schools, what they do, they give some clear-cut, strong definitions and fixed descriptions of their own views. And there is also the implication that other views are wrong. Advaitins they will never say that other views are wrong. They will tell you, you can even go beyond that. So with this, we will conclude today's session. Now you are most welcome to ask questions, and I'll be happy to answer the questions. Thank you. Namaskar. Yeah.
When you mentioned that Advaita goes beyond Ananda Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha.
Yeah.
There is also that Atman is Satchidananda.
Yeah.
Ananda is Sukha Swarupa.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify what the distinction between
That's right.
Swarupa and this?
Yeah, that's right.
What
That's
you were
right.
making
Yeah. Satchidananda, in the higher Vedantic discussions, you will find out that Satchidananda doesn't amount to a complete definition of Brahman. It is only an attempt to define the non-definable. Because every book, every word, including the Upanishads, are all within the realm of duality. Only experience is purely Advaitic. So even when you define Brahman as Satchidananda, existence absolute, knowledge absolute, and bliss absolute, that's all we can do at the realm of words, which is within Dvaita. When you reach Advaita, silence is only language you can use. Experience can only be expressed in silence and as silence. It's an important point. I mentioned this earlier. Every word in the Upanishads, every statement you find is only an attempt to practice sadhana, spiritual discipline. When you read these Upanishads, Satchidananda, all these, when you become familiar with this, what happens is, these ideas help you to remove from our mind all other non-spiritual, non-Advaitic ideas. And once we reach that stage, that Nididhyasana, beyond that, it is only experience. That way Shankaracharya is very emphatic in his point. Anubhavaika Vedyam. Anubhavaika Vedyam means it can only be known. Vedyam means through anubhava, through inner experience. This is an important point in Vedanta. In Vedanta,
Can you
books,
repeat that phrase, please? Anubhava eva vaidyam.
yeah, anubhavaika vedyam, Brahma, anubhavaika. I mean, see, by anubhava alone, only by anubhava, it is vedyam. Vedyam means something that can be known, something that can be comprehended. Again, the comprehension is not intellectual comprehension, not objectified cognition. Rather, you feel that inner joy. I tell you, Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel, he says, for example, when you talk about milk, when you discuss milk, that's one thing. When you drink milk and when you get benefited by milk, that is something different. That's what Sri Ramakrishna says. The same idea you can find. So Advaita Anubhuti is only reality. That's only Advaita. Actually, all discussions about Advaita take place at the Dvaita level. That is a very important point in Vedanta. Discussions, teaching, student, a subject that is being taught, all these are within dualistic level. You know why? Otherwise, Advaita will become a concept. They can read in books, they can discuss on a platform. Advaita in its true nature is only a matter of inner, inexpressible, inexplicable joy and not something that we can talk about. But then why do we talk about it? When we talk about it, our mind gets purified. Instead of talking about anything else, we are talking about something that is beyond talking about. So this is an important point to remember. That's why all the great enlightened people, they spend their time only discussing spiritual subjects. You may ask the question, after having experienced, why should they discuss? What else will they do to discuss? They don't discuss about the stock market's fluctuations or anything. After you attain spirituality, what Ramana Maharshi, I can give an example, Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi had reached spiritual experience, Advaita. But what was he doing all his lifetime? He was talking only, discussing with Sri Ramakrishna. He was doing nothing but discussing. Shankaracharya, he was going all around the world writing books and discussing and talking, teaching and so on. So this is an important point to remember. So, at the sadhana level, it is a means to reach experience. The sadhana means as a means. You are still progressing, you are still evolving, you are still struggling to reach the experience level. That is sadhana. When you reach the experience level itself, what happens? It becomes your natural habit. I cannot give better example than Ramana Maharshi, closer to our times. He was living in his place, Ramanashrama. But then he was talking about spiritual subjects only. Most of the time, all the time. Nothing else to do. So, but then at the same time, Advaita is not something to be talked about. But what will you talk about? When you reach that stage, the Brahman is only reality. Then that only becomes the subject of discussion. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Swami.
Yeah.
Thank you for this discussion. So you talked at the end a bit about the Advaitin idea of liberation or bliss and Nimbarka's view. And my question is about this idea I've heard in the more devotional philosophies about the individual soul merging with Krishna or Vishnu or something like that.
Yeah.
So what I've heard is that, they, like the more devotional schools, they believe that all the souls are different from God. The jivas are really different from God. But then when you have liberation, you're merging back with God, is that any different from the Advaitin view where you're realizing that you have always been the same? You know, you're doing practices in both cases, and then suddenly there's this merging or there's this identity. Is there a big difference there?
Yeah, all these non-Advaitic schools, as I mentioned, they belong to one or other schools of Vaishnavism. So, for example, Ramanuja believed in the Pancharatra, Sriman Narayana, and Nimbarka believed in the Bhagavata view, that is Vasudeva Krishna. With regard to reaching that higher stage, both are in some respects similar, but slightly different, of course. But Nimbarka also wrote this well-known book, the Prapanna Kalpavali. And Ramanuja wrote the well-known book, that is Saranagati Gedyam, and also his idea of Saranagati, self-surrender. The same idea you find in Nimbarka's book, with the result to such an extent that many scholars consider that Nimbarka lived before Ramanuja, so Ramanuja took it from Nimbarka, and some others believe that Nimbarka took it from Ramanuja. So anyway, the idea is the concept of God as somebody who blesses you, you merge in Him as a result of your spiritual disciplines and God's grace. That is one way or other common to all these Vaishnava schools of philosophy. There is not much distinction with regard to this. Ramanuja believed, for example, the idea that when you grow in spiritual life, you reach God's place, Vishnu Loka, Vaikuntha. Nimbarka doesn't talk about Vaikuntha. So there are some differences. Nimbarka talks about Radha. Nimbarka brings in this feminine divine identity, feminine divine figure called Radha, which is not, that concept is not found in Bhagavata Purana, but you can find this in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system and also in Nimbarka's system. So there are differences, but idea that when we, at the end of our life, when we leave this body, we reach a higher place, higher world, higher celestial plane called Vaikuntha, Salokya we call it. And then you reach very close to the divine, Samipya means close proximity. Sarupya, you get some divine form similar to God. And then Sayujyam, you get this higher identity. So all these ideas are in varying degrees found in Nimbarka system and also in Ramanuja system. So that's a common concept. That means after dying, after death, the blessed devotee will reach a higher plane of existence where he will be removed from all his sin, all his wrong deeds and their effects. He will be blessed with living in close proximity with the divine. Very similar to Christian theology. You can always find some similarities between Abrahamic concepts of, reaching the higher celestial place. If you read Augustine's City of God, a kind of Sattvic concept you can find. Very similar concept you find in these systems. You can find these many ancient Puranas also, you find these ideas. That goes back to 2000 BC, Vishnu Purana, some of these Puranas also contain this idea. After death, so you will, a blessed devotee will go to higher plane of existence where he will be living in close proximity with this deity and he will be living a blessed life there.
So this, from that description, that's actually quite it's not so similar to Advaita.
Yeah.
In Advaita, you have this realization that you've always, not even you, but that there is this one reality,
Yeah.
and that all these other concepts.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, now, thank you.
Yeah.
The very important. Now, if you put this question in Advaitin, you know what you will say from Advaitic perspective? To reach the Advaitic concept of going beyond its transmigratory cycle, you should not have even a desire to go to Vishnu Loka. You should not have even a desire to go to this higher log of Vishnu. That also is a bondage according to Advaitins. Advaitins will tell you, you should even go beyond that. So, somebody who becomes a devotee and who after death he is blessed to go to Vaikuntha or divine place, living in close proximity with God, according to Advaitins, they have to be born again after a long time. And again, with their sattvic background, they have done a lot of spiritual disciplines. They will continue their journey, and then they will reach a point where they don't have even a desire to go to Vishnu Loka. They want to go beyond that. So again, you have to remember, Advaitins do not criticize or reject this idea of going to celestial world, Vishnu Loka or anything, the world of Vishnu, the world of God. Advaitins tell you that there is even a higher level of spiritual experience. That's the idea. According to Advaita, even a desire to live in a higher plane in close proximity with the deity is itself, in the higher sense, is a limitation. It's not wrong, but there is scope even to go beyond that.
I think the last two answers for the crispest communication on what Advaita is. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So my question, you kind of touched upon it in the previous comment, that the more I understand about Nimbarka, he was much more closer to Sri Ramanujacharya, apart from emphasizing on Tapati, which probably is implied in all his Dvaitic practices.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, where is the Advaitic element in Nimbarka's thing? I don't see much of Advaitic, to call it Advaita. So that's where my comment is. It's more of Advaita, or more like it's more closer to Ramanujacharya. But what is Advaitic about Nimbarka's teaching? Maybe that's the question.
Yeah, there is Advaita in Ramanuja system also called Vishishtadvaita. See, Advaita is technically called Surupaikyam, but its very nature, it is one with Supreme. Ramanuja says Vishishtaikyam. It is identical with Brahman, only in a conditioned manner. Conditioned by what? It is Advaita, but conditioned by this conditioning factor. What is the conditioning factor? This external world, Achit, and all the living jivas, Chit, they all evolved from Brahman. And that Sriman Narayana is present in all living beings, Antaryami. So, when the Sriman Narayana is present as an indweller in all living beings, there is a level of identity. At the same time, not total identity as in Advaita. So in Ramanuja system also, there is an element of Bheda and Abheda. It is not exactly the same, but there is an element of Dvaita and Advaita in Ramanuja system also. And frequently, there is a view that the great commentator, Vedanta Kaustuba, a commentary on Vedanta Parijata Saurabhava of Ramanuja, is the author of the Vedanta Kaustuba was Srinivasa. So there are many scholars who believe that Srinivasa was highly influenced by Ramanuja philosophy, because he elaborated on Nimbarka system. Nimbarka's Vedanta Parijata Saurabhava magnum opus is very brief. It needed very elaborate commentaries. So Srinivasa did that. But according to many scholars, Srinivasa himself was highly influenced by Ramanuja's system of philosophy. There are, I told you, just mentioned earlier, remember, there are scholars who believe that Nimbarka lived even before Ramanuja, their view. Anyway, that's in India, many academics, they are asked to present a paper on some original topic in All India Oriental conferences. So frequently they concoct something new, they make some researches, and they concoct a new idea to satisfy the conditions of acceptability for accepting the conferences. That's a different subject. And another thing I want to mention, suppose you ask Ramana Maharshi, very simple question. Suppose you ask Ramana Maharshi, don't you want to go to Vishnu Loka? And just hypothetically, I wanted to answer a previous question. I have to go one few steps further. Suppose somebody went to Ramana Maharshi and put this question to him. Why are you sitting here? Why don't you pray to Vishnu, Narayana, Sriman Narayana, so that you can go to Vishnu Loka? Then Ramana Maharshi would ask him counter question. But is there any place other than Vishnu Loka? Because according to Ramana Maharshi, was an Advaitin, everything in this world is an expression of the divine. So where to go to where? That's the point. Now Advaitins, they are experiencing the presence of the divine, Atman, everywhere in everyone. So they don't feel the need to go to a special place to feel a proximity with a God. For them, this world, living in this world itself is living with Brahman, with that consciousness. That is called Jivan Mukta. You are living in this world, still you are liberated. So if you went to Ramana Maharshi, asked, why don't you go to Swarga? He says, what is Swarga? Why should I go there? Why should I go to Vishnu Loka? I am living, I can see the divine everywhere. So Advaitins transcend the need to go to Vishnu Loka. But they do not reject it. They don't say it's wrong. They don't say that. But they go beyond that. That's all. A professor teaching literature in university, if you ask him, why don't you learn your alphabet very well? He learned this alphabet maybe 50 years ago when he was in the kindergarten. Why should he again learn the alphabet? That's how it is. Thank you.
Hello, Swami. I have a question, but I thought of two things in response to what you just said. It's a very, very enlightening. One was somebody asked Ramana Maharshi, or they said to him, they were lamenting because he was dying, his body was dying. He said, oh, you're going to leave us. And he goes, where can Ramana go? I don't come or go. Also, Swami Vedanta and Swami Akhandananda, they were, and I remember Vidyanananda's, Akanda said, Ananda said, well, we go to, Ramakrishna Loka. And Ananda said, well, if I think of Ramakrishna nonstop without ever forgetting, aren't I already in Ramakrishna Loka? And Swami Akhandananda said, right.
That's right.
So they have that.
You're right. That's you have a very instinctive understanding of the true implications of Advaita. What you said is absolutely correct. You don't feel the need for that. Because for Sri Ramakrishna, he was suffering from cancer. You did not feel there was a special place where he can go where there will be no cancer. For Sri Ramakrishna, even while suffering cancer, the pain, he was always living in that consciousness of Brahman. There was no need for him to go to Vishnu Loka, as we mentioned in the Ramanuja system or Nimbarka system. So this is a very important point to remember. At the highest Advaita level, you don't feel a need to go from anywhere to anywhere because there is no place from where you can go or any place where to go. Same reality.
Swami, I had another question when you're ready.
Yeah, please continue.
So what is interesting to me is that in the Advaita philosophy of Shankara, he will talk about Satchidananda or it's the fourth, or or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But in Buddhism, he doesn't say. There's no, even though he doesn't say what enlightenment is. He's silent on that, except for saying he's awake. Why the difference in Shankara's system where he gives the word Satchidananda, and in Buddhism he's kind of silent about that?
Yeah, I will come to that. When we discuss Buddhism, you see, in Buddhism there are two fundamental streams. It's called later Buddhism. One is Sautrantika and Vaibhashika, realism, and Vijnanavada and Shunyavada, idealism. Now, in Buddhist tradition, especially among the Hinayana system, Sautrantika and Vaibhashika system, you extinguish yourself. This imagery of lamp self-extinguishing itself. Nothing is left. So in Shunya system. But there is always the implication that you experience something that is similar to what Advaitins call bliss, Satchidananda, Ananda. So in discussions between Buddhists and Advaitins, if nothing is left, everything is Shunya, then who experiences this experience of liberation? So you become an enlightened person, and you get enlightened. And who is experiencing this enlightenment? When you get enlightenment, you go beyond all this, these 12-fold links, and your transmigratory cycle comes to an end. Because Trishna is completely gone, you will not be born again. You go beyond all the karmic cycles. So, Praditya Samutpada, dependent origination. You transcend that. And then you get liberated from this. Who gets liberated? And who experiences liberation? If there is nobody left behind. So, according to many philosophers, there is one point where Buddhism leaves something unsaid. Buddhism leaves something very important unsaid or unspoken. That is, I think that's the meaning of Buddha's silence. When Ananda put questions to him, some other disciples put questions to him, the nature of God, nature of things, Buddha became silent. So we will discuss that later when we discuss Buddhism. So in Advaita, on the other hand, you feel yourself liberated from this Praditya Samutpada. I am using the Buddhist terminology in the context of Advaita. But when you go beyond all this, you feel yourself liberated, you become one with the Supreme, which always exists, which never born, which never dies, which always in a state of bliss. Again, that is not a concept, it's an experience. And that experience cannot be explained or defined. So, there is one point where Buddhism becomes silent. Not because it has transcended definitions, but it stops short of definition. Stopping short of definition and transcending definition is different. Not different things. It's an important point. We will discuss this when we discuss Buddhism.
Thank you, Swami.
But I can also add one important thing. If you look at the life of great men like Buddha, some of the great Buddhist monks, you can feel in their life and teachings almost the same that you feel the lives of great teachings of Rama, whether Ramana Maharshi or Vivekananda or of the great saints, the number of saints in Indian tradition, hundreds, scores of very enlightened. We don't hear about the Shivapuri Baba who lived for 138 years, lived in Nepal. There are many, even in Sri Ramakrishna's life, you come across, Pavahari Baba, Swami Bhaskara. There are many great saints you hear about. Now, they were always living in a state of blissfulness. So, actually, if you read the life and teachings of some of the great enlightened monks of Buddhist tradition, you find something very similar. But if you refer to your philosophy books, you feel there is a lot of difference. But you observe their life and the essence of the teachings, they sound strikingly similar to the teachings of the great enlightened Advaitin sages. This idea. Same serenity, the same transcendental look you find, outlook you find. But if you take a book, compare with another book, at the level of books and ideas, you cannot see an identity. That's why we are all discussing these philosophical systems, not only from a academic perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective. Okay, thank you. Thank you, namaskar. Yeah.
I'm going to make my question very short and to the point.
Yeah.
I've been reading the book of Swami Tattwamayananda called Spiritual Heritage of India.
Yeah.
And in the section on Nimbarka, he talks about another Vedantist called
Bhaskara, yeah. Veda, yeah.
Bhaskara, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was wondering who he is and if we're going to discuss him at some point.
Yeah.
And the other part of the question is, in my reading of the Bhakti Sutras, again, compiled by Swami Tattwamananda, there's a mention in the part called Exemplars of Divine Love. It says the sage Shandila. And I'm not familiar with who that is. I was wondering if you could enlighten me as to who these people are.
Okay, fine. First of all, Bhaskara. Bhaskara was an exponent of a system of philosophy called Bheda. That in a Bheda is not very different from Dvaita of Nimbarka. That's why Nimbarka had to call his system as Swabhavika Dvaita to distinguish that from the Bheda doctrine of Bhaskara. Bhaskara lived the 9th century AD. I mean, that means maybe around 150 years after Shankaracharya and maybe around 150 years before Ramanuja. And if you believe the standard views, the commonly accepted views, then Nimbarka came after Ramanuja and before Madhvacharya. So in a way, we can say that Nimbarka must have read Bhaskara, Bheda, we must be familiar with Bheda philosophy of Bhaskara, but you don't hear much about Bhaskara right now because his name is not so well known, not so seriously studied as Ramanuja and others. So Bhaskara was a philosopher, and his system of philosophy is distinction and identity. Bheda means distinction. Identity means Abheda means identity. He believed in that. That was his idea. And about Shandilya and Narada, there are two important bhakti school philosophers. One is Narada, the more well-known name is Narada. He also wrote Narada Bhakti Sutras with many translations. The most wonderful translation you find, Swami Tattwamayananda's translation, published by Madras Math, the most recognized and well-known translation of Narada Bhakti Sutras in English. Actually, that book was many times as big as the published version because Swami Tattwamayananda was an astounding scholar of not only Indian system of philosophy but also Christian theology, all the known or well-known important works of Christian theology published till maybe right up to 1950s he had read. So you can find him quoting from so many books. Swami Tattwamayananda's translation of Narada Bhakti Sutras published from Madras. But you can get that book from our bookstore. Another well-known author is Shandilya. He was also equally, not as well-known as Narada. He is also a very well-known Bhakti philosopher. both of them agree more or less. They speak unanimously. They agree in certain points. For example, according to Narada, Satu Asmin Parama Prema Rupa. And then Shandilya Sa Paranurakti Ishware. So the highest devotion is continuous, deep, intimate love of God. This is the common view of both Narada and also Shandilya. This is how they define the most sublime dimension of devotion to God. They are very similar and almost identical in many ways. Okay, thank you for the question. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.